There's a man with a gun over there.
Hiya! Penguin Truth here, and it's time for more Otaku Evolution. Be sure to like, subscribe, and contribute to the Patreon. You won't do that last thing, but hope springs eternal. Anyway, this week we'll be looking at the OVA that got me into the Universal Century timeline, the 8th MS team. If you haven't been following my videos, and why would you, I've long since established my fandom for the Gundam franchise, and I tend to prefer the UC timeline. But the UC timeline is notoriously nigh impenetrable, especially for younger viewers and in later chapters. In order to make sense of, say, Gundam Unicorn, you need to have seen at least the original Gundam series in Char's Counterattack. But for you to get the full experience of Char's Counterattack, you should watch the original series, then Zeta Gundam, then Double Zeta. It makes you wonder what the audience is for movies like the upcoming Hathaway's Flash. 40-somethings who still watch anime and remember all of Gundam? This is why people need an entrance to the UC thoroughfare. Somewhere to start, something made less than a decade from when you were born. These days you can get into the UC timeline with Gundam Thunderbolt or the Gundam The Origin OVAs. Honestly, there ought to be more side story OVAs that re-establish points in the UC timeline. But there was an OVA that was my tunnel into the UC cavern that even aired on American television. Who were the Federation and the Zeon? What was the 1 Year War? What was with the giant robots? I wondered these things as I struggled to watch the 1979 original Mobile Suit Gundam when it aired on Toonami. The show was so old and somewhat clunky. This was long before it was one of my favorites. I felt alienated by the dated animation. But luckily, there was a show on late at night on Toonami's Midnight Run that illuminated the who's and what's with more modern art and animation. Mobile Suit Gundam, the 8th MS team. So I started taping it, even though it was already a few episodes in before I got to it, and started watching it, ending up watching it all in repeats. And it did a phenomenal job at establishing the conflict of the 1 Year War in a way that a modern viewer would be comfortable with. Not to mention, it did it by taking a more grounded approach, focusing on mostly regular grunt soldiers who weren't the greatest heroes of the war. Gone were the candy-colored mobile suits and bizarrely shaped mobile armors, not to mention the ridiculous names and inconsistent art. No longer were the characters participating in major battles and daring gambits, but just trying to survive in a harsh environment. And no new types. Well, not until the extraneous 12th episode, anyway. But what is 8th MS team about, if not amazing aces and important figures? Well, it's basically Gundam shine through the lens of the Vietnam War.
Yeah, sure, and they told me I'd get a big parade when I got back from Nam. Instead, they spat on me. I can still feel it searing.
In a jungle in Southeast Asia, neophyte Ensign Shiro Amada arrives to command the 8th Mobile Suit team of the Kojima Battalion. The Earth Federation and the Principality of Zeon have been battling it out in the heated region, and the Zeon are secretly testing an experimental weapon in the hopes of using it on the Federal Forces HQ. The 8th MS team scrambles to identify this new threat and find the enemy base as the clock winds down to the project's completion. Our main character, as I mentioned, is Shiro Amada, who previously witnessed the gassing of a space colony by the Zeon. He begins very idealistic, always ready to give a speech about teamwork, but over time the unsavory tactics of the Federation and their mistrust of him weighs heavy on him. He never quite loses all his idealism, but becomes wiser to the good and bad of both sides of the war. As a mobile suit pilot, he's pretty skilled, though hardly an ace. He's good at unconventional methods to achieve success.
This is getting fun now.
Now it's your turn!
Master Chief Petty Officer Karen Joshua is a serious, somewhat jaded member of the 8th team. She is a widower whose husband was killed in combat. She acts brusque and standoffish at times, but she's pretty loyal to her team. She isn't afraid to voice her opinions, often loudly, but never strays too far into insubordination. She also has medical skills.
I'm a musician! Don't cut my arms off!
Shut up!
Do, please don't
Recon
do
mission
it.
my ass. You do whatever you want, whenever you want to. Mikkel, hold it right.
Hey! Wait a minute! You're forgetting something! What about the anesthesia for the pain?
Chief Petty Officer Terry Sanders has been fighting for a long while, but has had horrible luck with being assigned to teams. All the teams he's been in have been destroyed, with him as the sole survivor, until he meets the 8th MS team. Like Karen, he's serious, but unlike her, is particularly reserved, owing much to his survivor's guilt.
In my career, I've had to watch every team I've ever served with get killed on their third mission every single time. And I always survive.
You mean you're a third-time Jinx?
This will be our third action together, and if I'm part of it, the 8th team is going to die.
Petty Officer Elidor Massis is kind of a slacker wise-ass off-duty, but once he's in the zone, he's extremely good at his job as a sonar expert in the 8th team's hover truck support vehicle. He has ambitions to one day be a great musician, or at the very least a songwriter. He's probably not entirely cut out to be a soldier, which makes me wonder how he got into the federal forces to begin with.
Will you shut up for once? We're getting out of here alive, because I want to hear my song! You hear that?
The meek young man who mans the gun on and serves as the co-pilot for the hover truck on the 8th team, Petty Officer Mikhail Ninorich, isn't the ideal soldier, and while he often has his doubts about the missions the team goes on, is at his heart a sensitive romantic. He is often writing letters to his girlfriend in the colonies, BB, which helps to sustain his sanity in the war. When he temporarily has to do both jobs on the hover truck, he buckles under the stress.
I tried to tell her that distance doesn't make a difference. So tell me, why doesn't she understand that?
You know, Mikhail, I'm sure she already does.
You think so?
These feelings you have, all you can do is keep sending them to her. Believe me, I know how it feels.
Yeah, maybe you're right. But I'm too far away to get those feelings through to her.
Then there's Kiki Rosita, not actually a member of the team, but helps them on occasion. She's the daughter of the leader of a group of guerrilla resistance fighters in a jungle village. She has a slight infatuation with Shiro, but never really makes it past that stage. She's extremely strong-willed and gutsy, never standing down from danger, and she's very good with the village's children. She does intelligence gathering for the 8th team.
But...
What? You want us to ride off and leave you with the Fetties?
The Feds are only here because of the information I provided. I'm gonna see this through to the end.
I see. The commander must mean an awful lot to you if you're willing to risk your life to help him out. Huh? Hold on!
See ya.
Go on, get out of here, you jerks!
The Zeon have their own cast of characters, like Aina Sahalin, a test pilot that Shiro met in space before arriving on Earth. Aina is from a prominent family, and starts to chafe under the pressure to perform. She's a competent pilot and dedicated to fulfilling her brother Gineas' wishes, but she also sees that both sides of the war have their good and bad people. She and Shiro fall for each other.
I am not just a doll for Gineas to play with!
Norris Packard is one of my favorite characters, though he doesn't receive a lot of development. He's a stalwart defender of the Sahalin family, and an ace pilot to boot. Norris is a no-nonsense kind of guy, but isn't without sentiment. He respects and cares for Aina, and is willing to put his life on the line for her and her needs. The battle between him and the 8th team towards the end of the OVA is some of the best material in the Gundam franchise.
Well, Miss Aina, the Kurgan will have to leave without me. I have found the place where I am to die.
Then there's Aina's brother Gineas. Something's wrong with this guy. At first he seems like just another ambitious mad scientist type, but over time the emphasis on mad increases, as he starts to lose his composure into full-blown lunacy. It's not clear what exactly his problem is, though Aina posits it's Freudian in nature. He also seems to have a physical ailment as well, but it's ambiguous. What isn't ambiguous is that he'll do anything to realize his goal of destroying the Federal Forces HQ.
Now do you see the vision? This is what I wanted!
What separates 8th MS Team from, say, the original Mobile Suit Gundam and most of its sequels is the focus on, for lack of a better term, realism. We're still talking about giant bipedal robots with laser swords, though they rarely use their sabers. Sure, but there's a certain hard-boiled grit and emphasis on flawed and complicated characters, rough and inhospitable environments, and the complexities and maintenance of extraordinary technology. Things break down, need repairs, follow some kind of mechanical sense. Battles are dirty and palpable, and the character development forces the mecha action elements into the back seat. You're not going to see a scene of characters stopping to check the foot mechanism of a mobile suit in other Gundam entries. Nor will you often see characters seriously injured, missing for a couple of episodes while they recover. And rarely do you see such a contentious discussion of loyalty and duty, or a critical eye to the overzealousness of the ostensible heroic side of the conflict. These things are the 8th MS Team's bread and butter.
Do you believe he saved that pilot because he intends to surrender her to us? I've already given an order for his execution.
I was never informed about this plan. Why, this is nothing but a lynching. Rob, Sally, Michael, we lost so many. They were all excellent soldiers.
Just one more. Won't make a difference.
Wrong, sir. Quite the contrary.
Owing perhaps to the change in director and writer during the latter half of the project, the focus of 8th MS Team trended more towards Shiro and Aina's relationship and less on the gritty guerrilla warfare of the previous episodes. Some have even accused the relationship of entirely taking over the story, much like the love triangle shoved into Gundam 0083 Stardust Memory at the 11th hour. But I disagree with this assessment. The Shiro and Aina relationship was well built up from the very first episode of the OVA, so it was only natural that their second meeting would be a little emotional, and might, with all that they've experienced since the first, recontextualize the entire conflict of the war for them.
Stop it! Do you want to kill yourself? Well, do you?
Sure, why not, Aina? This is our war, too. And if this is our war, then what hope is there for us?
Is it true that the show somewhat shifts away from the jungle combat? Certainly. But the jungle still surrounds the area that the theater changes to, and the action always maintains a certain level of groundedness. While the shift to the melodrama between Shiro and Aina may not be what you sign up for when you sat down to watch the OVA to begin with, its apparatics, while not entirely as realistic as the rest of the series, entertains thoroughly and brings us to a satisfying climax for the story. Well, at least until the distant epilogue. Ah yes, the 12th episode of 8th MS Team, the one with the new type children from the Flanagan Institute. The episode takes place sometime after the One-Year War, with a discharged Mikkel along with Kiki searching for Shiro and Aina. They encounter some strange children who have been given the names of people Shiro knew after meeting him and Aina at one point. One in particular is fiercely protective of the name he's been given, but after a misunderstanding is cleared up, Mikkel and Kiki begin to get along famously with him and the others. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but I'd say that most of the episode is pretty extraneous. Not awful, mind you. I can see what they were trying to do by showing one more time how the war affected innocent children and the importance of identity, but ultimately as an afterwards for the main story, it just seemed unnecessary and distracting. They very well could have made Mikkel and Kiki's journey a short montage in the credits of the previous episode, with the final scene at the very end. I'd say I've warmed up to the episode over time, but it still sticks out like a sore thumb when compared to the rest of the series. You could skip it entirely and end the OVA with episode 11 without missing anything. New type children in 8th MS Team. What were they thinking? That's the last thing we needed in this show. 8th MS Team might not have all the plot complexities of, say, Zeta Gundam, or the iconic charm of the original Mobile Suit Gundam, nor does it hit as hard emotionally as War in the Pocket, or seems like a culmination of a life's work like Turn A Gundam, but it's still one of my favorite chapters in the UC timeline, and Gundam in general. If for some reason you haven't already seen this, I'd definitely recommend it, even if you aren't necessarily a fan of the franchise. Well, that wraps up Otaku Evolution for now. We're nearing my 200th episode, so I wanted to take some time to reflect on my best episodes next time. It's self-indulgent to be sure, but it's my show after all. Anyway, until then, see ya!
Not there? Aw, shit! He's going right for the crew!